Review all the best sports clips from around the world. Now you're probably wondering, why should I watch over here instead of over at the other channels? And that's because over there, they don't care about what you have to say. They say this all the time. They talk down to us. They think we're just a bunch of clowns on YouTube, Twitter. But I think it's the opposite. I think we know exactly what we're talking about. So I read every single comment. So if you think what I'm saying is the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, let me know in the comments below. If you think what I'm saying is the most amazing thing, then definitely please let me know. Either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and it's turning into something truly, truly special. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. So without further ado, let's get to it. We're watching a clip of First Things First, talking about the 49ers and the Chiefs and the Super Bowl, and whether or not the 49ers will be able to win a shootout. I think it looks like Alex Smith may have said something. Again, I didn't watch this clip. I could only see when I was first queuing it up. It looks like Alex Smith made some sort of comment. I assume the Alex Smith from the Chiefs history. And so I don't know. I think that's like I'm kind of confused by that statement then, quite honestly. It's saying that the only way that they could win is through a shootout, which I'm not sure. Then that's putting a lot of pressure on Purdy. If anything, I would say that the Chiefs would be banking on the fact that Brock Purdy couldn't win a shootout. Not saying that he can't, but I'm just saying I would think that the Chiefs would be banking more on that, or the fact that they're banking on their defense being able to stop Purdy in that offense, so therefore not having a shootout. Not to mention a shootout would then be to win, that you would be under the implication then that you're outdueling Patrick Mahomes, which I think is also, I'm kind of confused by that, quite honestly. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they have to kind of say about this. Doesn't really make sense to me right off the bat.
From New York. It's the show that has to play 65 shows in order to qualify for any awards. Wow. And I'm not going to make it.
No, you've got a lot of vacation time.
I think it's unfair.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
I love it.
We start with the First Things First Bowl. Again, Brew has not picked 49ers.
Then why is it like that?
I don't know.
Why? I mean, I'm grinding. Every day I'm looking at the All 22. I'm studying. I'm going over plays and everything.
Yeah.
I haven't made up my mind yet.
Okay. Your reaction to your old buddy Alex Smith?
I think it's spot-on analysis by what was up until 5 years ago, the greatest Chiefs quarterback of my lifetime, with respect to Trent Green, the great Alex Smith. This is why I think San Francisco's in such a rough spot.
Okay, so that's what he's essentially saying, that 49ers can only win in a shootout because I guess they're saying that the defense isn't good enough, and so Patrick Mahomes is going to put up lots of points, so you better hope that, okay. All right, I guess let me see what they have to say then. That makes at least makes a little more sense.
Because if Kansas City can block San Francisco's front, and I think they will be able to even without Tooney, and Tooney might play but might not, but Allegretti did a great job against Baltimore. I think Kansas City, even with the wide receivers that were, a big topic of conversation all year, can carve up the San Francisco back end. I think the only way San Francisco can win is in a shootout, and the problem is, well, a couple things. One is Kansas City doesn't get in shootouts. But first, let's show you San Francisco this year. They don't win low-scoring games. They are unbeatable if they get to 24. If they're under 24, so they haven't won any game like what Kansas City did against Baltimore. A low-scoring defensive struggle on both sides of the ball. But here's the other piece of it. Kansas City doesn't let you score. So I've told you before, they've allowed 30-plus once in the last 36 games. But this is the team, most games in a season, allowing under 25 points. So Kansas City is tied for the most ever. I understand the season's now a game longer, so take that for what you will. But 19 of their 20 games this year, they have allowed under 25 points. The only team that didn't win the Super Bowl was actually Andy Reid's 0-1 Eagles. If you then expand that, and this is via Scott Casimir, shout out to him, to games allowing under 28. The Chiefs are at 100%. Every game this year they've allowed under 28. Every other team that did something like that won the Super Bowl. And so I don't think a shootout is likely, and I do think a shootout is San Francisco's only path. So, yeah, I agree with them, but I think that's bad news for the Niners.
Look, it's like that's why they say defense wins championships.
Yeah,
when your defense is great, that's you right. You came
the
up with
Banners
that, like,
said that
3
once,
weeks
if
ago.
you remember. Yeah.
And what I've been disappointed in these last few weeks is San Francisco's defense.
True.
All right, I get it. Brock has started off to some slow starts, but he's obviously come through. The defense, the way they've been run on, and they were a good run defense during the season. But these last 2 playoff games, they gave up 180 some odd yards. Last week to Detroit rushing 130 something to Green Bay before that. I'm not so much worried about their back end. I'm worried about their stopping the run. If Isaiah Pacheco is able to get 7 yards here, 6 yards there, 8 yards there, then they're going to be in trouble.
So I get what Nick was saying about, holding the teams down to below 28 and stuff like that, which is all, very relevant. I mean, the only thing is that, and I forget what the exact stats were before, we kind of looked at that before where it was like, I think it was before the Bills Chiefs game, where it was like, the Chiefs lose any game that they don't score at least, well, I forget what the cutoff was, 19 points. Like, I feel like it was like a random odd number. And then Nick got really upset about that. He was like he was very upset and got very defensive about that stat. And then lo and behold, I'm pretty sure that the Bills Chiefs game broke that, where the Chiefs did give up like the 24 points. And yet the Chiefs obviously still won. And again, I forget what the exact hard numbers were, but it was essentially implying that since the Chiefs don't score enough, that when they do score enough, when the other team does score enough points, that the offense isn't good enough to kind of keep going. So, again, if we keep talking about using history as an indicator of what's going to happen into the future, which is what everyone wants to keep doing for all these games. That's what everyone did for the Chiefs, for every playoff game for the Chiefs, really. Kept saying, look what they did against this defense and against that offense, and look at this. This is what they've done for the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. This is what they always do in the second half, yada, yada, yada. Well, then if that's the case, then it has to go both ways, right? And then it's like, okay, well, then what happens in the games when the Chiefs give up these amount of points? What happens? They lose, right? That's what that initial stat prior to the Chiefs Bills game kind of showed. And so I don't see, though, where you would have to expect, because we know for the most part, the way I look at it is this, is if Brock Purdy can play a very good, consistent game, more consistent, he has to play better than he has in the last 2 playoff games, right? Like, again, I don't think he can get away with any sort of like of a rocky quarter or a rocky half like he's had. And I think he definitely really can't get away with turning the ball over, giving Patrick Mahomes extra possessions. That's just, it's already difficult enough just giving him the amount of possessions that he's just going to get regularly in a game, let alone giving him extra possessions. That's a no-go. And the defense for the 49ers hasn't been their strong point right now. But I think it's a little tougher because against the Packers, that was a wonky game with a lot of rain, obviously, and some turnovers, so extra possessions for the Packers offense. And again, there was a few like really big chunk plays that also kind of skew some of these stats and stuff like that. And like I said, it was pouring at times, so you're obviously leaning on the run game more and more. And then you played the Detroit Lions. Like, the Detroit Lions are a really good team. They were in the NFC Championship. That wasn't a fluke. They were a really, really good team with an amazing up-and-coming offensive coordinator with 2 amazing running backs, right? 2 1,000-plus yard running backs, which is no joke. So, yeah, they got run on because that was a high-flying offense at that point. I mean, they were firing at all cylinders. So I don't know if you can necessarily completely gash the 49ers for that. And then again, theoretically, then you can go back to the Ravens game. And again, this is all situational because you could say, well, look, against the Ravens and Chiefs, the Chiefs didn't put up any points really. They put up like nothing. Why did they score more? I don't think did they even score in the second half? I'm not sure. Whatever it wasn't a lot. And so then you could be like, see, the Chiefs didn't score. So you could do it both ways, right? We could always look at these previous games and say, these are the reasons that something happened. And it doesn't mean that, again, it's going to happen in the next game, aka the Super Bowl. So, and these are also different matchups, different energy, different weather, different home field versus away. Like all these things are matter, honestly. They really do. Also having extra time to prepare. I mean, you're having 2 weeks now to prepare for this team, which also it really does matter. You don't know who you're playing, obviously, in the playoffs until you see the next team wins. So that also really does matter. So I'm just not so sure, because under this logic as well, we know McCaffrey and just the 49ers as a whole can definitely run the ball. And the Chiefs technically have a weaker run defense. So, and when the Ravens did run the ball, which was very limited, when they did run the ball, it went very well. Again, very short little sample size, because the Ravens abandoned the run for whatever bizarre reason. So I think this game is probably a little bit more difficult to decipher for the reasons that I just kind of laid out. I don't think it's as cut and dry as we kind of want to make it sound, because again, I think it's easy just to look at the Chiefs and say, well, the Chiefs, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, an elite defense, let's go, going up against a more up and coming quarterback who has not obviously established himself fully as a Super Bowl champion winner, right? We don't really know how Brock Purdy is going to play in the Super Bowl. We just don't. And it's not out of the realm of the possibility that he plays awful or that he plays unbelievable, and then he plays great, and him and the 49ers are absolutely flying high. And if that's the case, and they're able to take advantage of all the weapons that they have, and obviously Kittle, Debo, and they also now discover, hey, Purdy can move. Purdy's got some happy feet under there. Like, let's go. And now Purdy adds that to his game, and they do it more. They rely on that more, which now keeps potentially the Chiefs a little bit more honest. I mean, I don't know. Again, Shanahan is a genius in his own right. So you have to believe that the 49ers are going to come with a great offensive plan against the Chiefs. I mean, I think we're very confident that whether it'll be able to be properly executed, that's always a question mark. You have no idea, honestly. I mean, just think of the Super Bowl with Tom Brady and the Rams, right? Like, that was like the most ridiculously low scoring thing ever, and you would be like, Tom Brady, like, come on, he can do more than that. And yet in that Super Bowl he couldn't, yet they still won. So you can never really predict what's going to happen in these games. It's just, you just don't know how all this stuff is going to unfold. Who would have ever thought that in the 49ers game that the ball was going to bounce off of the Detroit Lions helmet and land right into Ayuk's hands? You can't predict that ever. Who would have ever guessed that the Ravens, who averaged 32 carries a game, were just going to cut that in half and just be like, nah, we're just not going to run the ball anymore. We're only going to hand the ball off 6 times. Like, no one in their right mind would have been able to predict that. So I think with this game, it just is going to come down to, because we know Patrick Mahomes is going to play a great game. But then the real question then is this: why have Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs struggled offensively all season, right? This is like the lowest scoring that they've had in their whole dynastic run. So then the real question is it really just all the drop passes? And if it's really just the drop passes, is it, has that been fixed now? Have those players gotten more confidence and now the drops are no longer an issue? I don't know. I mean, that's also kind of a tougher pill to swallow. I think the argument has been made before that Patrick Mahomes doesn't trust these receivers, so he also doesn't push the ball downfield or make more of these tighter throws, or throws that maybe if he had more trust in his receivers that he would be able to throw to. And so therefore the offense is a little bit more limited. And again, kind of like Nick pointed out before about how the Chiefs, how Patrick Mahomes is making very specific decisions based off of the game. He's not forcing the ball down the field or trying to go for touchdowns because he knows he doesn't need touchdowns. Also, Andy Reid is a wizard at getting the maximum out of his own team. And, and again, if they don't have that confidence in them, will they be forced in this game to do that? I think that's the question. If the Chiefs, like, put it this way, is what I'm ultimately trying to say, is if the 49ers bring the offense and bring the power and they can really, get rolling and get going and put up enough points, can the Chiefs offense sustain that? Again, we know some key players can. We know Travis Kelce will show up. We know Andy Reid will show up. We know Pacheco. We know Patrick Mahomes. But can they do it consistently? Because we haven't seen it this whole season. Yes, we've seen it in years past. But again, as I pointed out before, that does not matter anymore because that at this point, it's different players, different offense. It's just different. You don't even have the same offensive coordinator. So we haven't seen the Chiefs have to really light up the scoreboard offensively. So, but at the same time, is the 49ers defense good enough to stop the Chiefs offense? This is such a tricky matchup, which just makes it really fun. I feel like I had such stronger opinions going into the other games, into the Packers, Cowboys, Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, 49ers, Lions, like all those games I had some pretty clear-cut ideas. But I think when you have two weaknesses, like again, technically the way how the Chiefs have really been able to thrive this season has been defensively, and the way how the 49ers have been able to really thrive has been offensively. And that's what's really interesting, because then it's like, well, what's the case here? When you have maybe not the leading offense and not the leading defense going up against each other, which is technically the lesser of the two evils. So to me, that's also what kind of made the Bills Chiefs game so interesting as well, because the Bills defense was so badly hurt and decimated, and one of the best ways to beat the Chiefs was to limit their offense, because they were not such a high scoring thing. But when they're going up against a hurt, depleted defense, then that offense, now that weakness is no longer as weak, and you don't have to rely so heavily on your strength. So that's what makes this game kind of pretty interesting for me.
And so I think they have to stop the run. Now I think they'll be somewhere in the middle. I don't think they'll get gashed like they did against Detroit running the ball, and I don't think they'll totally shut them down. I think also, Nick, unlike Baltimore, I think they are going to say, look, and this is what I would do, Kelsey's not beating us. Like if Rashee Rice or MVS or somebody beats us, fine. We are stopping him. He is not going to have a
Nobody
heyday.
can
Been
do that.
saying that for years.
But every team has it. I mean, regular season, we saw some games where they
but in the
doubled him and
playoffs,
didn't get
no
him
one
going.
can do that.
Well, most of those playoffs, they had a Tyreek Hill to worry about.
No, but the last 6 games they haven't, and he's killed everybody.
This year, this is what I would do. I mean, Kelsey's great. He's probably the greatest tight end ever. But that's got to be a focus.
It's not going to happen.
And if Rashee or one of these other guys beats me, I can live with that. But that's what they have to do. Shootout, look, they're going to have to be able to score. Can they run on Kansas City? They're going to have the run game. And then I do think their skilled players on the outside I know Kansas City's defensive backs are great, but I think they got great receivers as well, and Kittle obviously. So I think they can have some success against them. I'm seeing the Chiefs in the mid-20s. And I think the question is, can San Francisco No, I'm not picking. Can San Francisco
get to
27 or 28?
Yeah, which would be the most points any team has scored on Kansas City all year.
The Kelsey thing is a non-starter. I've tried to come up with several solutions to stopping Travis Kelsey, whether it's double team him. I also broke out this. Remember when you're passing Kelsey the ball?
Yeah.
Put your hand out, let the ball hit your hand instead of Kelsey's. None of it works. And smarter minds than me, it's like he's not running conventional routes. You're supposed to be guarding what's on the tape, and he's doing something else, and him and Mahomes have a mind melt, so that's unstoppable. The question for you is...
Can I expand on that just real
Sure.
quick? As good as Fred Warner is, no team is built to better stop Kelsey than Baltimore. Because they have two excellent inside backers like San Francisco does, but they also have Kyle Hamilton, and San Francisco obviously lost Hufanga, and Kelsey was targeted 11 times, had 11 catches.
And Mahomes was yelling,
yes,
they can't guard you.
Yes.
He can't guard you. I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, but go ahead.
The question for you is, do you think Mahomes is going to have a similar game plan, if he gets out to an early lead, put it in cruise control, or do you think he's going to be like, it's shootout time?
So this is what is so fascinating is while Mahomes in his non-Super Bowls has never started poorly in the playoffs. In his non-Super Bowls, he has always started hot, and I think the Chiefs have scored on their opening drive in 9 consecutive playoff games, 8 or 9 consecutive playoff games. And that includes last year's Super Bowl, but then they slowed down a bit after that. But every Super Bowl, they have trailed at halftime. Every Super Bowl, they have, they have started slow. The Niners won, they were down 10 points with 6.5 minutes left. The Eagles won, they were down 10 points at halftime. And obviously the Bucs won, they were trailing start to finish in that game. So I find the very fascinating on Kansas City flipped the script to a degree where the game is played on their terms the way the Baltimore game was. I don't know, but what I do think is that the one thing Patrick Mahomes has never done in his career is have a start-to-finish brilliant Super Bowl. So I thought the Eagles game, he was damn near flawless, but he only threw for like 180 yards, if you remember, because they had so few time of possession early in the game. They scored defensively.
Which is
obviously
yeah.
The Niners Super Bowl. He was amazing in the second half, or in the fourth quarter, really was all. And Tampa Super Bowl struggled the whole time. So I don't think he's going to want to put it in cruise control ever. But I also think that if they get a 2-score lead, they are, and I'm not saying I'm predicting that, they are going to make San Francisco prove they can make it a 1-score game before they start to be very aggressive like they did against Baltimore.
But again, they can just chip their way down the field. That's what they did against Baltimore.
Yep.
Yeah, I think trying to predict how that flow of this game is going to go, right, whether or not they're going to score in the opening drive or this or that, again, that's a losing battle from my perspective, and pretty unnecessary. These are like prop bets and stuff. So I think, again, overall we're pretty confident that Patrick Mahomes is going to play a great game, right? So whether or not it's start to finish or whether or not he has a bad quarter or a slow start or, whatever, you just don't know. So to me, it's kind of pointless to even predict. But again, I think with this game, I think so much of it is going to come down to the weaknesses for both teams. And because we're pretty confident, the one thing that I think we can be confident in is that all the strengths that each team has, that they will rise to the occasion, that they will play at a high level outside of, injury and whatnot. Because these teams, these players have established the ability to do that. Anytime we've had these other teams go head to head against other teams, they were against unproven teams, right? They were against unproven coaches or unproven players who have not shown to be able to consistently compete at the highest level. The perfect example of that is Lamar Jackson, right? Lamar Jackson always kind of had that question mark of, can he come up big in the playoffs? How can he play? And then that seemingly was erased after he had a big game against the Texans, but then it kind of came back to haunt him again in the next game. And so, and the same thing with against the 49ers, against the Detroit Lions, right? That was against a very much unproven team, as well as the Packers. That was the youngest team since like the 70s or whatever to go on the run that they did, maybe even longer than that. So, but this squad right here of both teams, we just are confident that these good, great, amazing Hall of Fame level players, we know that they're going to play, right? We know that they are going to step up. We know that they are not going to be any type of liability for them. We know Christian McCaffrey is not going to be a liability. We know Travis Kelce is not going to be a liability. We know Patrick Mahomes is not going to be a liability. And we know Debo, hopefully as long as he can stay healthy, and Kittle. We know these players. We know Shanahan, the moment's not going to get to him and he's not going to know how to coach, and call a game. We know these things because we've seen these things consistently play out. But we weren't able to say the same thing about Jordan Love and the Packers, about Dan Campbell and the Lions, about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. So to me, that's when it now comes down to the weak points. And so the real question then is who has the greater weaker points? And what the most fascinating thing is you have, and just to use general terms rather than being like outside linebackers versus, the backfield, this, that, like, I don't want to get into that too nitty-gritty of it. But it's like I said earlier, it's like technically the weaker part of the Chiefs is their offense. And again, even Nick Wright has been saying that their defense has been leading them all season. This hasn't been the most amazing year of all years for Patrick Mahomes. And then the 49ers have theoretically the weaker defense. So you're having a weaker offense, they're, again, weaker, relatively speaking, going up against a, relatively speaking, weaker defense. And so it just, to me, is how does that clash? How does that clash? And then the ultimate wild card ends up being Brock Purdy, because we don't know how he will play in this situation. And he's given us the last 2 games very uneven games. So it's like, again, I think if he can play well, then that really kind of then really now relies on the offense versus defense, the 49ers offense versus the 49ers defense versus the Chiefs offense. But if Purdy doesn't play great, then to me, then it's like it's too much for the 49ers to withstand against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs should, be able to win. But I think that's kind of the way how I'm seeing it as of right now. But what do you all think? I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this one. Do you think that San Francisco, the only way they can win is through a shootout? Please let me know your comments below. Would truly love to hear them. And please don't forget to subscribe. As I said, we are building an amazing community here, and I would truly love to see you part of it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really, really helps with the visibility and the algorithm, and it's so easy for you. Just click the button, and it really makes a difference for me, and I would truly appreciate it. Thank you so much, and see you next time.